Yeah, we get snow maybe once a year, maybe. And sometimes we'll get snowed in for about a week, and that's really nice because, we're not used to snow. So
Right.
everything shuts down if it sticks at all. There's no snow trucks that I don't even know what they're called.
Snow plows. Yeah.
Those. Yeah, there's none of those. They go out and I think like the firefighters, the rescue squad goes out and salts the
Wow.
road, the main roads, the big roads, but
Right.
all of the little back roads, the road I live on is a one lane, so one car can go through it, nearly gravel road. They're not out here salting this stuff. So that's the only time I really like snow is when we get stuck in the house for a few days.
Well, that is the best because then you have a reason to like not, it's like, I don't know, snow day, snow week.
hmm Have you always lived in Chicago?
I am from Chicago originally,
Okay.
and I keep moving away, thinking it's going to be better somewhere else, and then I always end up moving back. And I am finally old enough that I think I'm done leaving, and I think I'm just here now is kind of how it's going to go. So, and I'm not mad about it,
Well, good.
but yeah, I've had some adventures. I've gotten to live in some other places, so.
Good. I've lived in the same 10-mile radius my entire life. But yeah, people think moving away is going to solve whatever problems they're having, but the issues is that you take you with you when you go.
Yeah.
And most of the time we are our own issues with the things. It's not really the place.
For sure. I will say I kept going back to the West Coast just because like I don't know, the quality of life is so great out there, in a certain way, but there were other things that were like trade-offs that
hmm
I ended up having to like make concessions for. So I'm glad I'm back. I am definitely like an urban arts and culture kind of guy. I like being near like I live 2 blocks away from the Art Institute of Chicago and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and those are like my favorite things to do with my free time. So while the West Coast was like laid back, easy living, it didn't necessarily have the arts and culture that like the East Coast and Chicago kind of have, which is really what speaks to my spirit. So I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, it's crazy how like these little pockets of culture pop up all around the country. People in Europe, because I have a lot of people from all over the world on the show, and they don't get it. I
Right.
start talking to them, and they're like, they know that the US is big, but they don't really quite get how big it is. And we start talking about cultures and how vastly different they range from like state to state. And sure, they like blend together a little bit here and there. So you have like regions, but
Mhm.
I think it's hilarious. Growing up in the Southeast my entire life, I think it's hilarious that over here is more known for being artsy but I guess like maybe it stems okay, because talking about the mystical and all of
Mhm.
that, I grew up in the Bible Belt.
Right.
5 years ago, I still felt like I would be burned at the stake for even talking about this kind of stuff. But
Right.
then you go just a few states over to like the Appalachian area, and it's normal.
Right.
And everybody does it. And everybody's always been homegrown and soaked in the mystics. And which is funny because where I'm at, we also were because we're in the Appalachian foothills. So a lot of those same roots and then it was very Native American heavy in this area as well, which also comes with mystical roots. So, but then we're also the Bible Belt. So, and Jesus has mystical roots, but they're different, and that's witchcraft, and this is not. So, even though, uh, the 70-year-old lady that you take your kid to for warts can magically remove them. And even though we're doing pendulum readings over pregnant ladies to see if it's a boy or a girl, like even though all of that's normal, um, and like psychics and stuff, like it's also super hush hush, or was when I was growing up. You weren't allowed to talk about it. You were allowed to do, like, even within my own household. my grandmother would take me to see a psychic, but also we weren't allowed to talk about it in the house.
Right.
It was a really confusing and weird way to grow up because it's like, yes, everything's magic and mystical, but no, that's witchcraft. Don't do it.
Right. Isn't that interesting?
Crazy. It's hard to navigate.
I have to say, I've been doing this for a long time now, and every single person that I end up sharing kind of like what I do, everybody has a story about it. So it's funny that it's so hush hush, as you say, or so, taboo to talk about it. But yet, like almost every single person I've ever told that I do readings or I teach psychic stuff or whatever, they're always like, oh, let me tell you about the time. And
Hmm.
like, it's like everybody has a relatable story about it, but yet no one's allowed to be in that open about it in a certain way. It's fascinating to me.
It is. I think it's I blame science culture
Hmm,
a lot, if it's not tangible, if it's not touchable and measurable, then it's obviously nonsense. And, we don't believe in nonsense. We're too smart for that.
right.
But with, I feel like a lot of the developments in the quantum department, especially, is
Yeah.
starting to bridge a lot of those gaps for us. And we're finding that it's not so intangible as, we may erroneously believe.
Yeah. One way that I've been talking about it is like the new age. Remember, like, I mean, nobody uses that term anymore, really, the new
Mhm.
age, right? But like that was very popular, when I was kind of a young adult. Um, it's like the new age happened in a certain way. Like I remember like I took a class on like spirit guides like probably 20 years ago at this point. And I remember being so like, oh my God, like no one can find out that I'm doing this. Like this
Yeah.
is so weird. And like I don't want my family to know. I don't want even want to tell my friends. Like I was super
Mhm.
into it, but I was like, oh, this is so taboo. Um, but now, like, everybody does it. And, like, it's not weird, at least to, like, the Gen Y and Gen Z of the world. And, like, you can buy aromatherapy at Target.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when, like, aromatherapy, people were like, do you want essential oils with your massage? And it's like, what? Like, that's so frou-frou. Like, who would want that? Like, that, ooh, that's so wooey. But, like, now all that stuff is so mainstream and,
Mhm.
like, it's okay to talk about it even in like commercial spaces like
Mhm.
Target or Walmart or whatever. So it's almost like the new age kind of like happened. And I've been saying lately, like we're in a new age. So it's
Mhm.
like this new age is like defined a little bit differently in structure than maybe the last one.
Yeah, the term New Age used to drive me crazy because when you really start studying it, it's all ancient wisdom and
Right.
understandings. I remember when witchiness started becoming popular on the internet, and I was like, oh my good. I was making fun of them. I was like, that's so cute. They think they're witches. Oh, that's so cute. Look at them. And then I started like it just kept popping up for me and kept popping up for me. And I was like, what is this exactly? And I started reading and I was like, oh, I guess I am also one of those. Because yeah, essential oils and meditation and yoga and getting in tune with nature and just all of those new age things that are actually ancient wisdoms coming back and making a resurgence. But I think maybe it's the progress of becoming competent in something. The four steps of incompetent incompetence is that's not the right word. But the maybe the new age, the original new age was like the third step, where know that we know how to tie if you don't know how to tie your shoe, if you've never seen shoes before in your life, you don't even know that you don't know how to tie your shoes.
I love
And
that.
then, so the third step is now you know how to tie your shoes, but you have to kind of think about it. So,
Mhm.
so maybe that's where we're at. We have to kind of think about it because even now, I've been doing this my entire life, honestly, in some way or another. And so I have all of these tools that I can turn to when I'm having a hard time with this or that. And I tell people and tell people and tell people. And I know it doesn't, they don't get it, but like the hardest part of any of it is remembering that you have the tools.
Right. And isn't that like the process of like internalizing learning? So I come from this is so interesting. I love this little tributary that we're going down here. I was very involved in the arts when I was a kid. And so like I trained as a singer and as an actor. And when I say trained, I mean I was in like high school choirs. And then I did go to undergraduate
That's
university for
training.
theater. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Any
you know,
experience is training.
yeah. But you know, one of the things they talk about with acting is like you learn, you know, you spend this whole process in rehearsal with your fellow actors and the directors and everybody, and you learn the blocking, right? So you memorize like, oh, when I say this line, I move here. When I do this, I put the cup down. When I say this, I'm wanting to be angry or like express anger when I'm saying this line. So like you learn all the mechanics of the script and of the performance. And then when you get on stage for the actual performance, you forget it. You forget it all. And you just go by instinct because you've spent all of that time in rehearsal training your body how to be in relationship to the environment around you in a certain way. And then the spontaneity of forgetting all that and just letting it be very natural and of and from you is the magic of acting. That's what makes it seem real and in the moment. And when we respond to like a really beautiful or poignant performance, that's what we're responding to is that it looks so natural. It seems like that person really is embodying that, right?
Hmm.
But it actually takes so much to get to that. It
Hmm.
looks like it's effortless and it's easy, but it actually takes so much to internalize all that.
Hmm.
And I've always felt, and I think this is speaking to what you were just saying, I've always felt that like intuitive tools and meditation practice and all this stuff is about sort of training yourself the blocking.
Hmm.
And then at some point, you kind of let it go. And then you just start moving through your life as yourself. And all of those tools are like sort of embedded in you in a certain way. And so now you are embodying that wisdom or that knowledge or those tools or whatever it is. And so you can bring it forth in a really spontaneous way.
Yes, it's the exact same thing living life. And that's why we have it. That's why it's called a practice.
Right.
You have to practice.
That, and I personal thing when I talk to some people and they're like, "Oh no, no, I'm just naturally intuitive and I just, you know, whatever comes to me." And like I think like all abilities, there's inherent talent with something. You know, there's people who can just play instruments. I
Hmm.
can't play an instrument to save my life. I've
Me
tried.
either.
I have no talent for instruments. Um, but you know, some people can just pick up a guitar at age 8 and like they're like, you know, just
Yep.
doing it. They know how to do it. And so I think that's true with psychic abilities and with intuition. There's a natural predilection to something. But it's not until you really train your instrument, and maybe your instrument is also could be yourself, right?
Hmm.
That you really start to have ownership of it and a refinement of that ability that really you can call on when needed. So you know, I kind of when people are like, "Oh, I don't need to take classes or I don't need to train. I do it naturally." I'm always like, "Yeah, but like if you don't, like you said, if you've never seen shoes, you don't know that you don't know how to tie them. So sure, you might be doing it kind of naturally and off the cuff, and you might have a natural predilection for that, but like you don't know what you don't know. And so how do you know what you're really doing
Hmm.
unless you've spent the time to like look at it for yourself or like sort of, I don't know, train in a way.
Yeah, you need that experience, the actual practice of doing, because you're going to inevitably run across issues.
Right.
And then, you know, a lot of people want to take this stuff and immediately like out to market
Hmm.
and start working on their friends and families, and which is a great, that's where you should start. That's where you should start is with your friends and families for sure. But you need that practice so that you can hit those hurdles and then understand them and surpass them, troubleshoot them, and know how to rework and whatnot. But yeah, there's a multitude of intuitive gifts, and we are more inclined to, everybody's has their own specialty, I suppose. And discovering your own specialty is part of discovering your identity as a person, which I think a lot of people are trying to do right now. A lot of people have woken up to the fact that they've just been going through the motions and doing what's expected of them for their entire life, especially in areas that are more rigid, like where I live. Everybody's just like kind of copied and pasted and slowly waking up to, oh, actually I'm my own person that can say no to this and prefers that over that. And but I have so many because I teach yoga and meditation. I have so many students come in and the questions that they ask me are surprising in the sense of like I'm not sure how you expect me to know how you feel. You know, like they're asking me questions about their own internal workings and their own body and like yes, I have a general oversight of how the human body works and how like the emotional body works and the energetic body and all of that, and that's good. But when I tell them that they need to ask their own leg how it feels in that position, it's like I'm speaking Chinese. A lot of people don't like we've been so cut off from our um natural instincts, I believe,
Yeah.
and taught to, you know, consult the experts for every little thing. We don't know. We didn't go to school for that. We didn't go to school for this. How could we possibly know the answers? But we know more than we allow ourselves to.
Yeah, culturally, it's like we're cut off from our own knowing ourselves, right? Is really the thing. So we misplace authority on anyone or anything outside of us, like you're saying, to tell you about you, when really, like, and you know, this is the essence of everything that I teach and that I work through with my students is developing that dialogue with yourself is the first task of a sensitive or of a psychic. If you're not attuned to yourself and able to have that inner dialogue with your own psyche and with your own sort of psychic landscape inside yourself, how could you read someone else,
Hmm.
right? Or how could you accurately read someone else without it being through the dirty window of your own stuff that you haven't taken the time to clear? I think what resonates when you're talking about your students asking you that stuff is, I get a lot of folks that come to me wanting to be professional psychics or wanting to be professional clairvoyants. And like, I think that's great. I think the world needs more of that. I think it needs to be more accepted. I'm happy to support anyone on their journey. But like, until you've really learned how to connect deeply to yourself, it's almost impossible to really connect deeply to another person. And there's so many different methodologies and ways to get to that inner dialogue. Some people do it through physical activity like yoga or sports, or, I know people that like are runners, which I could never do. I only run when chased and nobody's chasing me. Um, but like how do you find that inner center and that inner dialogue with yourself? And then once you have that, it's easy to start to open up to include other people in that ability. But it really all starts with yourself. And so when people come to me for classes and stuff, I try to set the expectation that like, this is going to take you time to develop this. And the development is very personal and very internal. And like, you can't just, as you said, like go to market with this, in
Mhm.
6 months. Um, the other thing that I think comes up a lot for me is, and I say this to people all the time, and there's always like this shock of recognition. Everybody wants to do this professionally, which is, I think, great. But as somebody who's been doing it professionally for like 18 years, I'm always like, yeah, like the way I frame this is I'm like, yeah, have you thought about like how much money you need to make a year to be comfortable? And they're always like, oh, maybe. And I'm like, yeah, so let's say $60,000 a year as a baseline. Like that's what's going to be comfortable for you. Okay. Well, how much is that a week? And then how do you divide that by 52? So that's like 9 readings a week. And
Mhm.
it's like that doesn't even include weeks off for holidays or vacation. That doesn't, you know what I mean? Like then you start looking at it as like an actual job that you're trying to do to sustain yourself. And when you
Mhm.
start really putting numbers against it, people are always like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, do you think you could do 9 readings a week every week all year without like a break? And they're like, no. And I'm like, right, like you have to be like realistic about like what this is going to take to actually do that, right?
Hmm.
So there's both that sort of internal checkpoint with yourself of like, am I really prepared to handle what I need to handle to read other people in a way? But then also, am I like, can I really sustain this for myself? And is this something that I feel strongly and passionately about enough that like I'm willing to fight that hard for it? And I find a lot of people just aren't. And I'm not. I have a day job because for myself, like even teaching, which I'm so passionate about, the minute it becomes about I need a certain number of students to make my rent every month,
Hmm.
it stops being fun for me.
Hmm.
It takes all the joy out of it. I'm like trying to hustle to make numbers rather than actually showing up authentically and just being myself.
Hmm.
Um, and that just drains all the fun out of it, honestly.
Hmm. I agree. You know, what they say about entrepreneurs is we work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I like
And
that.
yeah, and that takes a lot of self-motivation. And if you're not obsessed with what you're doing and the love of it, then it is not for the faint of heart
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah, and so like for myself, I found a solution where like I have another job that I love that's flexible enough that I get to sort of own my time in a certain way. And I have months where I don't do any readings, and then I have months where I do like a dozen, and
Hmm.
like it just kind of ebbs and flows with what kind of capacity and bandwidth I have, and
Hmm.
uh, it keeps it very grounded and very real, I think, in a certain way.
Yeah. Circling back to earlier about how you can only take people as deep as you've gone yourself. Um, I think that that's a huge disconnect that we have with, and don't get me wrong, I think therapy and psychology and those types of things, counseling, those are all really wonderful things that we definitely need. But I feel like they could use more of their own internal work most of the time
Yeah.
because they're just, because I've been to therapy and I've talked to other people who have been to therapy, and the overwhelming consensus seems to be that they're just kind of regurgitating what they learned in school, which is you can't learn this sort of thing from books. You can get ideas, you can get directions, you can get formulas, but then you have to actually go in and do the work yourself on yourself before you can. I completely agree with that statement. Hopefully we can bridge the gap somewhere in between. I think coaching bridges the gap a lot. Like, we've seen a big surgence in coaching over the last, I don't know, decade or so.
Yeah, yes, I agree with everything you're saying. And I personally went through a process earlier this year where I went to therapy for the first time. I'm in my late 40s, so like I had avoided therapy most of my life, but I was going through a rough time and I needed another adult to tell me if I was crazy,
Yep.
basically. Like I was trying to make a series of life decisions and like decisions about some boundaries and relationships that I was in. And I understand the energy of it and the energetic perspective, but like, I also don't want to be an asshole and I want to be like a nice human being. So I
Yeah.
sought out a therapist. I was like, I'm having this very specific problem. I could use another adult to tell me if I am being rational and like clear-headed about this. And he did
Mhm.
a really nice job of doing that for like 3 or 4 months. And then I was like, and I'm done. Like, thank you. That's exactly what I needed you to help navigate me through this weird space I couldn't navigate myself through. And it was
Mhm.
so beneficial. But then I was done with it. And I think sometimes people rely on therapy to be sort of a catch-all for everything rather
Yeah.
than very specific to a problem you're trying to solve. Because I think therapists are very good at offering different perspectives to solve problems, which is
Uh-huh.
not the same as energy work or as a psychic reading.
No.
The purpose is not necessarily to solve a problem, it's to become aware of things. And I think that's a different purpose than therapy in a certain way.
Yeah, I think people use it as a crutch a lot. I know several people personally who anytime an issue comes up, they're just like, I need therapy. I just need therapy. But they won't go to therapy. And I'm
Right.
like, and they have 1,000 excuses for why they can't do that, can't afford it, insurance, whatever, whatever, whatever. I'm like, okay, but me as your friend and loved one, you could just talk about it with me instead of just shutting down. We could do that. We could just, it's not like I'm not a therapist, but
We could just communicate.
yeah, amazing, right? Imagine that.
Well, and yeah, isn't it funny? Like also people saying like, well, my therapist says. And it's
Hmm.
like, well, that's great that that's what your therapist told you, but what do you think based
Hmm.
on what your therapist told you? Or how do you digest what your therapist has suggested? And how have you internalized that and now are, embodying that or living that advice
Hmm.
in the way that feels natural to you? So I think also there's that replacing, again, your sort of own inner work and your own inner life with like, well, this is what my therapist said I should say, so I'm going to say it.
Hmm.
Like again, that's displacing authority outside of you.
Yeah, it's a lot of responsibility to take responsibility for your own actions and your
God.
own thoughts and if we know, and that's the thing, there is no right and wrong answers. There, to even an extent, there's the line between crazy and not is very blurred. And honestly, the right answer is whatever best helps you cope in the most positive manner for your own health and well-being so that we can, add to the great village community mix in a healthier way as well. Because if you're seeped in toxicity and denial and avoidance and just, overwhelmed and consumed by your own emotional uh, traumas and turmoils and just inner battles, then that's exactly what you're bringing to the community mix. And,
Hmm.
we all want a village. We're all starved for that human connection and community and the village aspect that we're supposed to have that is so unbreakably strong that even at our worst, we have people come to us and love us and help us through it. Like that's what we want. That's what we yearn for. Um, but and coming back to my friends and family members who won't even talk to me about the thing. And granted, sometimes it's a whole lot easier to talk to a stranger about things than it
Oh,
is personal like, but that's how we learn how to build these relationships is going through the turmoil together. And like your therapist is great for some things and getting you started and getting the momentum moving and pointing you in a direction, but it's the people in your life that you can find to feel safe with enough to have these conversations instead of just, avoiding because you're afraid of how, stirring the pot or uh, confrontation or whatever. Having those hard conversations with the people in your life is how you build that community and that village and that web of safety so that when life inevitably throws you a wrench in your system, then you have a little bit of cushion to fall back on. And that's scary for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. People are afraid to rely on people and ask them for help, and people are afraid to make themselves available for people to help them. And it's hilarious because when you really experience helping people and listening to people and being there for people, most of the time, I'd say a solid at least 80% plus of the time, people just need somebody to witness what they're going through and validate their emotions and make it a safe place to be like, yeah, you're right. You don't have to beat yourself up for feeling this way. The way you feel is completely legitimate. Like that's a tough place to be in.
yeah. I also think, when I talk about intuition or psychic abilities, like like three categories that people fall into, sense, see, and know. And all three are valid and equal. But what I find is that most people are overdeveloped in one of the three. So you're either a sensor, a seer, or a knower. And when you're overdeveloped in one of those aspects of yourself, you're often underdeveloped in the other two because you've been either overly validated or you've spent all your time and abilities have been sort of honed in a certain aspect. So I'm bringing this up because I think also one of the benefits of community and particularly learning and growing in a community environment is there's room for everybody that has the abilities that you don't have, which means
Hmm.
there's people who can say hello and help you in your blind spots. So if I'm a sensor and I feel everything all the time and I'm very in my feelings and I'm good at sensing what other people are feeling, like that's my superpower, but I'm not so good at seeing or at knowing. I'm just good at the feeling part. To be in a community where there are people who are like super good at knowing rather than feeling is actually like a really great benefit because you don't have to be good at everything. You can be good at the thing you're good at, but you also have the support of the greater whole with people who are good at the things that you're not good at, right?
Hmm. Yeah, that's kind of like there's this thing, I don't remember if they named it or whatever, but in family units, they divide the memory banks.
Okay.
So and I really liked when I don't remember how I came across this information semi recently, but I really liked it because I was like, that's exactly how my own family works, you know? If the kids come to me about something and that's not my department, I'll send them to their dad. And it's not because, oh, that's not my department. It's because he's better at that than I am. So we just let him handle all of that. And that's exactly how the community is supposed to work as well. It's supposed to be not only the nuclear family doing that, but the neighbors, the
Broader
friends,
community.
yeah, everyone.
Yeah, there's also the opportunity, I think, to mirror and to grow in those maybe things that you're not good at or that aren't your specialty by watching other people who are good at them do them. You start to
Hmm.
learn by observing, like, oh, that's how that person handles that, or that's how that person responds to that. Like, and then you start to mimic and learn how to
Hmm.
find your own answer in your own way with that. So, in a way, like I've always said, the academy that I run, like I always say, we're like a guru free zone. Like nobody has all the answers, you know? Um, and our faculty, myself included, we're just there to hold the space for people really to teach themselves and to
Hmm.
teach each other. Is kind of the vibe that we try to set because I think people learn by being around other people that are experts rather than having somebody tell them this is how to be or this is how you should or do it the way I do it, right?
Hmm. Yeah, collaborative. We should
Right.
definitely be more collaborative. And it helps you understand who you are. And look, you said that, sorry. What I mean is if you're around somebody and you're like, oh, I like the way they do that, mimicry is
No,
the
it's
the
learning.
highest.
Yeah,
What are your words? Um, and but mimicking and that person and taking on that aspect of them doesn't necessarily mean that you're being fake. And I think a lot of people worry about that. I we as people are the individual is we have some base things that are set, but for the most part, we're reinventing ourselves every single day through choices
right.
and ideas. And, let me experiments. Let me try this out and see how it feels. Let me try that out and see how it feels. You know, we can choose our character essentially every single day. And that doesn't skirting the difference between personal truth and what we would consider fake is a matter of what can we comfortably continue? What can we integrate into our being so when we step on that stage, it just automatically comes out rather than having to think about it?
Isn't it funny? There's so much like psychic baggage or like weight or resistance on that idea of mimicking. But like you as a yoga teacher, how did you learn yoga? Somebody taught you, like you learned by being in a class and watching other people do the poses. You learned by
Hmm.
somebody showing you how to do the poses. And then gradually over time, like any artist, and this is why I really think psychic abilities are an art and
Yes.
should be treated as an art and should be taught as an art form rather than as a science or as a commercial endeavor. Over time, I'm sure, and I don't know you well, but I've known you for a few minutes now, and I can guarantee when you teach a class, it's a piece of art. It is everything that you have learned, but told through the lens of the here and now and who you are today, rather than the exact way that somebody showed you 12 years ago how to do it, right?
Hmm.
And that is the way the artist learns. When you learn how to play the guitar, the first thing you learn, I don't know if you've ever taken guitar lessons,
I have.
the first thing you learn is how to hold the guitar, which you're like, what do you mean how to hold the guitar? Like you just hold it. And it's like, no, 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 no. There's like a whole and it's about the relationship between the instrument and your body and like where it sits on your lap or your leg or your arm differently than other people. Like it's a relationship between you and the tool.
Mm.
So like what we forget, and I think this is very Western and it's probably very capitalistic and very American, really, is that like we learn by mimicking first. Like someone has to show you how to hold the guitar. And
Mm.
then you start to learn how you hold the guitar. And then you don't need somebody to show you that anymore. You've developed it for yourself, right? And then you learn chords, you like A, G, C and then you put those together, right? And then after you have that foundation, maybe then you start to play a melody line and you're like, "Whoa, look at I played Horse with No Name. It's like a melody, like it sounds like a song." But like that's weeks after you first start, right?
Mm.
So everybody wants to run to that finish and play the song,
Mm.
which is how you express yourself. But before you even get there, you have to learn the basics. You have to like
Mm.
learn how to have a relationship between your body and the experience, I think. I don't know. I'm being very esoteric and long-winded about it, but I think you get
No, no. You have to learn you have to learn the rules so that you can properly break them.
it. Exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. It's so good.
Yeah. Um, I agree. And I think that it's such a strange concept for people these days. Like, because again, yoga, most people don't think of it as an art. They think of it as a rigid exercise. So, they want to know about form and they want to know, I'll tell them, I'll explain the form and we'll walk through it and we'll get them into it. And they're like, well, but, but that can't be right because my leg doesn't go like that. I'm like, well, that's where, you have to come into the modifications and you have to your leg may never go like that. Or we may just start on the edge over here and slowly work our way there, and one day it will. And we've become so fast paced, everything's so right now, instant reward system that anything that takes a little bit of time to learn, you have to really, which I think, again, things are changing, things are always changing, but I see people starting to, instead of constantly dabble in this and dabble in that and never really make any progress in anything, we're starting to figure out that we kind of have to commit and devote to this subject or that subject, you know? So like uh Duolingo, most people are familiar with that. Um you do one lesson a day to keep your streak going and people make fun of that. You're like, you're not actually learning anything. That's garbage. But actual devotion to learning a language means that maybe you're not doing just one, like that's the bare minimum. That's just getting you started because getting started is the hardest part of anything. Getting those gears moving and then you build that momentum and you just kind of go with it for a while. So it takes maybe a few lessons a day. Maybe you get a book and you read that. Maybe you find somebody who speaks the language and you practice with them. So, like, we're moving away, I think, from traditional education systems that are notoriously one size fits all. I spent 2 years in high school learning Spanish and came out with the vocabulary of a 2-year-old. And but learning on my own with the tools that the world has given us via the internet is just such a remarkable gift that any of us have access to these. Honestly, most of us have access to if we just point ourselves in a direction and commit to it.
Yeah, and then building on that, also there's then the next step, like because there's learning the language, right? And I can use your Duolingo example. Like there's learning the vocabulary and the words, but then learning how to converse is a totally different thing
Completely
than
different.
learning the words, right? And so part of what we offer at our the Seer Academy is we have these practicums everywhere where people come in and practice reading on other people, like, and it's a very open shared space. So people at different levels, different backgrounds, different experiences come in and practice, and our faculty is there to oversee and to coach. And a lot of people sometimes have like they're like, well, I don't need coach. I don't want anybody observing me. I don't need coaching. And it takes a minute to get people to understand the value of having somebody outside the experience, watching the experience and
Mhm.
giving suggestions and feedback in real time. Because oftentimes you don't know. I'm going to take this all the way back to the beginning of you with your tying your shoes. It's like you don't know what you don't know. And
Mhm.
so if you're just doing it the way you've always done it, you might be missing something. And so
Mhm.
I try really hard to impress on people that, coaching is not meant to like criticize you or
Yeah.
to make you feel like you're wrong or feel like you're not doing it right. It's more like I'm here to coach because I might be seeing something that you're not seeing that you
Mhm.
just don't even know you're not seeing. And so
Mhm.
if I can help you almost like a horse with blinders, right? If I can help you like open up that blinder a little bit and like now all of a sudden there's this whole other field of view available to you. Like that's what real learning then is. It's on the job learning in a certain way.
Mhm.
And I think people really come around to seeing the value of it, but it's hard for people. They're very sensitive about that. They don't, it feels vulnerable. It feels invasive in a certain way sometimes at first, but people
Oh
always
yeah.
coming around.
I am historically uncoachable when it comes to sports
Okay.
specifically. I grew up in a very sports-oriented family, and it just wasn't for me. And then started playing pickleball about a year and a half ago and got really into that. But in the beginning, for like a year, don't coach me. Don't coach me. Don't tell me nothing. And the problem with that was not necessarily that I was unwilling to listen, but for one, everybody wants to be a coach, whether they have earned that title or not. So that's, finding a coach that you can respect and you trust is one hurdle for sure. But I needed to experience the sport and the rules and the navigation of it by myself for a little bit to be able to understand because people I don't I didn't have enough foundation in the sport to really even understand what people were trying to tell me. So like they're just it's just words that is hindering my practice. Like great, I appreciate your well-meaning words, but I'm trying to actually implicate right here, right now, implement. And sometimes you have to get to a certain point with the subject and the understanding of it before you can even understand what people are trying to coach you and tell you.
Right.
So there's starting, I feel like there's a certain amount that you can coach with like beginners, brand new, but and then like when they get more advanced, you can kind of it's easier to point out what they're doing here and what they should be doing there. But that middle area, you just kind of sometimes you just gotta let them hit the ball and see what happens and
You
feel
just
it
gotta let
out.
them cook. You just gotta let it simmer on the stove for a while. Like eventually it'll be a stew, but for right now, it's just everything's coming together. Yeah, I also think it's like an art of teaching and coaching that a beginner
Hmm.
needs a beginner needs something different than an intermediate, that needs
Hmm.
something different than an advanced student. And understanding the nuance and the art of that is, I think, what makes a good teacher or a good coach. Certainly if like I have a new student, I hold them with different gloves than I do an
Hmm.
intermediate or advanced student. Knowing full well very consciously that like I'm speaking to them where they are rather than where I want them to be or where they think they are. And I think that
Hmm.
makes all the difference in a certain way.
It absolutely does. You have to meet people where they are in every subject and area of life.
I mean, isn't that true?
You're just gonna drive yourself crazy otherwise. And them. You're gonna drive everybody crazy. You're gonna drive yourself and everybody else crazy if you don't.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun. This is such a lovely conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I've enjoyed it as well. I
Yeah.
like to uh I like to bring I read a lot of you kept covering this right here in the information that I was reading on you was bringing the practical to the eccentric. And that's what I really try to do too, especially since, again, I felt like I was going to be burned at the stake for years up until like real recently. And uh, as recently as probably 6, 8 months ago, my what is time? But I would post something on a local Facebook group about yoga, just about yoga classes. Like, hey, we have a yoga class over here at this time, this day. Like, that's it. That was the post. And people inevitably would comment on it about how it's the devil's work and how any good standing Christian would never go anywhere near yoga and how it's rooted in all of these other religions. And, yoga is not supposed to be religious. Definitely, some people take it there because it's a personal practice, but it inherently itself is not supposed to be religious. And if you have a yoga teacher that makes it religious, and like pushes that, that's not really where
Yeah.
it's supposed to go. It's supposed to be a cultivating of your own beliefs and practices and whatnot. But uh, there's this book called The Inner Temple of Witchcraft. And who is it by? I can tell you.
As you're pulling that up, I'm just going to throw out, isn't that an interesting perspective? Because the foundation of modern American Christianity is like, don't be aware of your own body, basically,
Uh-huh.
your own body autonomy. And I think all your comments on Facebook tracks with that programming and people, right?
Yeah, yeah. I could talk about I have done episodes about really I grew up in church as one does in this area and was super confused about why for one they seem to skip over the part where Jesus was like anything I can do you can do too.
Right.
So like 6, 7 years old I was like okay how please
Yeah.
how but don't do any of it. Like Jesus, he was awesome. Be like Jesus, but and you can do what he can do, but don't actually do what he could do because that's witchcraft. So I thought that was
Yeah.
anyway. The book is by Christopher Pinkzak,
Okay.
Penczak. It's called The Inner Temple of Witchcraft, and he has a couple of them, and they look like the cover of it looks like we worship in the devil. That's what it looks like. It's a little scary on the front for Christian households who are, trying to follow Jesus and whatnot. So but the inside of the book's all about meditation, like and energy work, every bit of it. It's a wonderful book and it's really well written and it's engaging. It's informative. So it's a nonfiction but he makes it really personable. He's like, hey, I'm a person that does this. You want to do this? Here's some cool things. Here's what I learned doing that. But I would literally, when my parents pulled up my grandmother pulled up into my yard, I'd be like, hide the books.
Hide the books.
So a big pro because I do yoga and meditation, but I've started getting more serious about Reiki. And that's been a really hard commitment to me for me, just because I have all these mental blocks of fear of being ostracized from the village and the community, especially since again, I've lived in the same 10-mile radius my entire life. My graduating class, just for perspective, was I think 60 people. And we went K through 12 with those same 60 people. And there was like maybe 300 at my entire school. So
Right.
like super, super small town. Everybody knows not only everybody, but everybody's lineage, you know? And the the downfalls of living in that small of a town is that nobody actually has to get to know you because they already know you.
Right.
They know your story. They know your parents' story. They know your cousins' stories. So they know who you are. So if you don't automatically fit in and come from oh yeah, those are great people, you just automatically get ostracized. And that's kind of where I was for a very long time. And so I grew to not trust anybody in my real life community. So I just laser focused on online stuff. And that's where I lived, and that's where I grew everything, and that's where I felt safe. Even though, like, I understood that people in our area could find me online and see that I was talking about all this stuff. But I kid you not, I lost a job because I was talking about this stuff online. And like not only lost the job, but the whole business blocked me across all social medias and everything.
Whoa.
It
So sad.
was, yeah, it was very mature, you know?
Well,
So,
I sometimes tell people you can't be doing it wrong if nobody knows what you're doing.
yeah.
And so I do think also, especially maybe when you're first starting out in this stuff, and this is probably different than your situation, but sometimes when newbies come for a class or something, I'm like, you don't need to tell your mom you're doing this. You don't need to tell everyone right away that this is what you're into or this is what you're learning. Like sometimes it's nice to have it for yourself first and like
Mhm.
really understand your own relationship to it before you start broadcasting it or trying to get everybody else to validate it.
Mhm.
Because, like I said, nobody can tell you you're doing it wrong if nobody knows what you're doing. And it's okay to have some secrets sometimes while you're in that sort of vulnerable gestating phase with any new skill or any new, but like if I'm going to learn,
Mhm.
I'm terrible at guitar. I've tried it 3 times. I keep taking lessons thinking I'm going to be better at it and I'm not. I just stopped telling people I was taking guitar lessons because then they would inevitably be like, oh, well, play a song. And I'm like,
Yep.
I can't. I'm bad at it. Like, I'm still learning. Like, no, I don't want to be bad. Um, so, like, at what point do you have it for yourself first? You
Mhm.
know? When I talk about being, bringing this stuff into practical life, like, I have a corporate job and I'm reading the energy of stuff and people that I'm working with all the time.
Mhm.
Do I tell them that I'm doing that? Absolutely not,
No.
because I don't want them to fire me. But it helps me navigate situations, it helps me navigate projects, it
Mhm.
helps me understand my own self better. And so, like where are the boundaries that one creates for oneself about like this is actually just for me, right? So let's say
Mhm.
even Reiki, learning a new skill like Reiki is great. Like, well, what if you just did it for yourself? Like without, and I'm not advising you on this, but I'm
Right.
saying
Mhm.
one, starting to learn that, it's like, well, where do you honor your own process and your own beginner mind? And let yourself have it in a way that feels validating to you without needing everybody else to validate it for it to be real for you. And
Mhm.
I, certainly when I was younger, went through lots of phases of getting super excited about new things and oh my God, like I remember taking my first clairvoyant class. I was like, oh my God, I can read everybody. And then like, my mom's sister asked me to read her, and that was a horrible experience because I was right and I said all the shit that no one had ever said to her whole life. And then all of a sudden I was the bad psychic, like that was not good. And it was like, actually, it was really good. But how long did it take me to recover from that
Yeah.
experience of being invalidated for actually being really good at it? So anyway, I'm kind of
Mhm.
meandering a little bit, but you get what I'm saying.
No, that was perfect. I love that because people need to hear that that's the reality of these things. That if you're going to, you have to, you have to be secure in your own practices before you can start sharing them with other people. And again, nobody can tell you it's right or wrong because the only thing that's right is what best helps you cope
Yep.
with the nightmare that is being a human in the world with an expiration date that we're
Yep.
not aware of. Like, it's terrifying. It's terrifying to be a person. And, you know, we're all a little crazy. We're all a little insane because of it. And either you're you have all the blinders up and you're just keeping your head in the sand and you're going about the days, and inevitably you're going to be faced with um the limited lifespan that we all are shackled to. And then what? I have, again, several people in my life who, they lost someone very close to them. Someone very close to them died uh 6 years ago, and they're still stuck 6 years ago. They were never able to move on. They were never able to recuperate. It was such a shock. One in particular I love to discuss is particularly close to me. Was my grandparents raised me, and my grandfather was slowly dying for like 10 years.
Right.
10 years. It just was painfully, slowly drawn out. And yet, when it finally did occur, there were other relatives who were just completely shocked, completely floored, and still to this day have trouble moving on. I'm like, you had all of the time to prepare. So like there's people who keep the blinders up, and then that's not healthy because then when you know, they can't help anybody else. They can't contribute to the community, the unit, the whatever that they're a part of because they're so stuck in that. Or you have the other people like me who are just entirely too aware of everything all the time. And that's a problem also. So
Right.
like happy mediums are good. But no pun intended.
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh, but uh, whatever helps you cope with the existential crisis that is life is the correct answer. And once you're secure in, okay, X, Y, and Z help me cope, period, point blank, I need them, they are mine, you can't take that from me, then it makes traveling outside of your comfort zone with it a little bit easier, a little bit more navigationally sound. Um, but I hid from my community for 30 years probably. And then when I finally started easing my way out of my shell, yeah, I got attacked. Yeah, I got like figuratively burned at the stake a few times. All of
Right.
my fears came true, which are very legitimate fears. We were literally burning people at the stake just a couple of hundred years ago. It wasn't that long. So all of that's really valid, but I've also been able to help so many people by no longer keeping it to myself. And I am so much happier and more fulfilled in my life and my purpose and my navigation of it all. And, when you really start stepping into your truth and your power and you're no longer afraid of it, because I think that's a thing that people have to navigate as well. There's so many layers that you have to transverse to be able to get to where you want to be. And you just have to take it day by day. And there's no secret sauce, there's no secret ingredient. It's just being aware of who you are and how you are and why you are that way every moment of every day as often as you can so that you can make intentional choices instead of just reactions.
Yep.
And you build from there.
I'll tie this all the way back to the beginning, which
Okay.
is when I talked about the actors going through their process and then getting up on stage and forgetting it all and just living it and just doing
Hmm.
it. There's a reason you don't invite an audience into the rehearsal, right? It's not ready. It's a vulnerable space where you're fumbling, you're learning, you're trying to teach yourself how to, be the character and how to do it.
You're crying, you're yelling.
You're crying, you're yelling, you're having conflict with your other actors, you're like getting notes from the director. Like you don't want anyone to see that. Like that's
Mhm.
for you. And so like understanding this is interesting. This is kind of where I feel like it's like our whole conversation is kind of summing up. It's like knowing when you're ready to be seen and you're ready to give is probably the most important part of the journey of the sensitive is not being forced to give or be seen before you're ready to handle the weight of that attention, right?
Yeah.
Like an actor at opening night. It's a big deal, like to invite people into that space to witness you. And I think as a practitioner, like being very intentional about that is probably to your best interest.
Yeah, there's always going to be critics.
Right.
There's always going to be somebody who doesn't like what you're doing, and you should
But if it's
stop
on
that.
your terms and you've invited them in, it's easier to weather that storm or to
Mhm.
withstand that pressure, right, in a certain way.
Yeah, if you're secure, if you expect it, if you're prepared, all of
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
So I've loved this. This has been great.
I
Uh,
know. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming in. Tell everybody where they can find you, what you have to offer. I know you
Yeah.
mentioned your school a couple of times, but
Yeah, so I do readings and mediumship healings. I also teach clairvoyance and mediumship at Art of the Seer Academy. So our website is artoftheseer.academy, and you can find that there. We have free drop-ins every week. People can come in and get free readings from our students and our members. Again, those practice sessions are super fun. I like to joke that it's like the best kept secret on the internet. It's like free clairvoyant readings every week for anybody who wants to come get them. So come check that out. And I don't know. I don't like selling myself. So if people have been interested in what I have to say, I have a blog and all sorts of other stuff on there.
yeah, selling's hard. If people are interested, then it's pretty obvious, and you don't need to sell. That's the thing is like I have so many people come on here trying with the sole purpose of selling their product or their book, and that's why I don't know if you noticed that because you didn't sound too salesy or anything when I was talking to you via email. So some people I'm like drilling it in every couple of paragraphs. I'm like, no selling, no selling. We don't do that. Uh, if if you are legitimately engaged in what you have and what you have to offer and you really know your stuff and you come in here with people can tell if you have their interest at heart or if you're just trying to make some money off of them, get them to buy something. And I think collectively our intuition is growing.
Yeah. No, and definitely the spirituality space, I think, has been overrun the last 10 years by the entrepreneur class everybody trying to scramble to like, I don't know, pull something together in that space. And I've been doing this long enough to know it comes and goes. There's feast and famine. There's like times when
Mhm.
people are like super into it. There's times where I don't have anything going on, and like that's just part of life. That's the natural flow of things. So yeah, it's been such a gift. I knew when I listened to a couple of your episodes, I was like, oh, this will be fun to just have a conversation, and that's exactly what we got. So I'm really happy about that. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Thank you for the conversation. That's what I live for. This right here.
Awesome.
All right.